I'm Dorothy, 58 years old, and I thought I knew everything about my husband Richard after 35 years of marriage. Then he died suddenly, and I found a locked box in his office containing a will I'd never seen before. Everything our house, his pension, all our savings, was left to a woman named Elaine Winters, someone I'd never met. The worst part, when I confronted my 3 adult children, I realized they'd known about her for years. They'd all been lying to me. Before I tell you how my entire life unraveled in a single afternoon drop, a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you've ever had your trust completely shattered by someone you loved. Richard and I met during our sophomore year at Northwestern University. I was studying education, dreaming of becoming a teacher, while Richard was pursuing accounting with ambitious plans for his future. We literally bumped into each other at the library when he rounded a corner with a stack of finance textbooks and nearly knocked me over. He was so apologetic, insisting on buying me coffee to make up for it. That coffee date turned into dinner, which led to months of dating, and within a year he proposed. "You're the only woman I'll ever love," he promised as he slipped a modest diamond ring on my finger. "I want to build a life with you, Dorothy." We married right after graduation in a small ceremony with just family and close friends. Richard had already secured a position at a respected accounting firm in Chicago, and I found a job teaching 3rd grade at an elementary school in the suburbs. We rented a tiny apartment, saving every penny toward a down payment on our first home. Those early years were lean but happy. We'd often spend Friday evenings with homemade spaghetti and cheap wine, mapping out our future on notebook paper. 2 children, maybe 3, a house with a yard. Family vacations every summer. Richard was determined to climb the corporate ladder, and I supported his ambitions completely. "You're going to go far," I would tell him, massaging his shoulders after he'd worked late into the night. "I believe in you." After 3 years of marriage, we purchased our first home in Glenview, a pleasant suburb north of Chicago. It wasn't anything fancy, a modest 3-bedroom split level that needed some work, but it was ours. I painted every room myself while Richard installed new flooring on weekends. When we finished, we threw a housewarming party and proudly gave tours to our friends and family. "This is just the beginning," Richard told our guests, his arm around my waist. "Dorothy and I are building something special together." Our family grew along with Richard's career. Michael arrived first, followed by Sarah 3 years later, and finally James, our youngest. I took a pause from teaching to raise our children, returning to part-time work only when James entered kindergarten. Richard never complained about being the primary breadwinner. In fact, he seemed to take pride in it. "My family deserves the best," he'd say. "Everything I do is for you and the kids." By our 15th anniversary, Richard had moved up to controller at a regional insurance company based in Chicago. The hours were longer, but the salary allowed us to move to a larger home in a better school district and put money away for college funds. I remember the day we toured the 2-story colonial that would become our family home for the next 20 years. Richard squeezed my hand as we walked through the front door. "Can you see us growing old here?" he asked. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. It was everything we dreamed about. As the children grew, our lives settled into comfortable routines. Soccer games on weekends. Family dinner most nights, though. Richard's absences became more frequent as he continued climbing the corporate ladder. He made CFO by the time he was 45, which came with more responsibilities and travel. "The Minneapolis office needs restructuring," he'd explain, packing his suitcase for what became monthly trips. Or, "The Cleveland branch is having compliance issues. I'll be gone 3 days, 4 tops." I never questioned these business trips. Why would I? Richard always called every night when he was away. He never missed important family events. He was present for every graduation, every championship game, every school play. He remembered anniversaries and birthdays. He seemed by all accounts to be the devoted husband and father. Our children grew into remarkable adults, each finding their own path to success. Michael followed somewhat in his father's footsteps, though he chose law rather than finance, graduating from University of Chicago Law School and joining a prestigious firm downtown. Sarah pursued medicine, completing her residency at Northwestern Memorial and specializing in pediatrics. James, our free spirit, skipped traditional college altogether and founded a tech startup that was recently valued at several $1 million. "We did good," Richard would say when all three came home for holidays. "They're going to be just fine." As Richard approached 60, he began talking about retirement. The company had a generous pension plan, and he'd been diligent about saving and investing throughout his career. We discussed traveling, perhaps buying a small vacation home in Florida, spending more time with our children as they started families of their own. 2 more years, he told me on his 58th birthday. Then it's just you and me exploring the world together. I looked forward to this new chapter, this reward for the decades of supporting his career while managing our home and family. I'd put my own ambitions on hold many times over the years, but I never resented it. We were partners. His success was our success. Then, on a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning, everything changed. Richard was working in his home office. He'd negotiated a flexible schedule as he approached retirement when I heard a crash. I rushed in to find him on the floor, clutching his chest, unable to speak. I called 911, started CPR as the dispatcher instructed, but by the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. Massive heart attack, the doctors said. Nothing could have been done. The days following Richard's death passed in a blur. Funeral arrangements, insurance forms, endless casseroles from well-meaning neighbors. Our children came home immediately, handling many of the logistics, while I moved through each day in a fog of grief. Michael took charge of contacting Richard's colleagues and organizing the memorial service. Sarah managed the medical details and death certificate. James set up a meal train and fielded the constant phone calls from friends and extended family. But something felt off about their behavior. Yes, they were grieving too, but there was something else. Tension in their shoulders. Whispered conversations that stopped when I entered the room. Exchanged glances I couldn't interpret. At the time, I attributed it to the shock and stress of losing their father so suddenly. We were all processing grief in our own ways. The memorial service was well attended. Richard had been respected in his field, active in our community, seemingly beloved by all who knew him. Colleagues praised his integrity and work ethic. Neighbors recalled his generosity and friendly nature. Our minister spoke of his devotion to family. As I listened to these tributes, I found comfort in knowing others had valued the man I'd loved for 35 years. Yet even then I noticed my children's reactions seemed strained. Michael kept checking his phone. Sarah barely made eye contact with Richard's work colleagues. James stood apart, his expression unreadable. After the service, Richard's boss approached me. "Dorothy, Richard was one of the finest men I've ever known," he said, squeezing my hand. "If there's anything you need, anything at all, please don't hesitate to call." I thanked him sincerely, but as he walked away, I overheard James mutter something under his breath that sounded like, "If you only knew." At the time, I let it go. Grief says strange things. We were all hurting. I had no idea that 2 weeks later, I would discover exactly what my son had meant. The first 2 weeks after Richard's funeral, I couldn't bring myself to enter his home office. The room where he'd spent his final moments felt haunted, somehow frozen in time. His coffee mug still sat on the desk. His reading glasses perched on top of a stack of financial documents. His cardigan hung over the back of his chair. Each item a painful reminder that he would never return. Finally, on a rainy Sunday afternoon, I forced myself to face the task. The life insurance company needed certain documents. Tax forms would be due soon. Richard had always handled our finances, keeping meticulous records of everything. If I was going to function as a widow, I needed to understand our financial situation. "You can do this," I told myself, standing at the threshold. "One file at a time." The office was exactly as Richard had designed it, practical and organized, with built-in bookshelves and filing cabinets, a large desk positioned to look out over our backyard garden. Everything had a place in Richard's world. He despised clutter or disorganization, something our children had inherited to varying degrees. I started with the most recent files in his desk drawers: utility bills, bank statements, insurance policies, each labeled and arranged chronologically. So predictable. So Richard. The familiar organization provided a strange comfort as I worked. After an hour, I noticed something unusual about the center drawer of his desk. It seemed shallower inside than it appeared from the outside. I removed the contents, pens as paper clips, a stapler, and examined the drawer more carefully. That's when I noticed a slight gap at the back. Pressing my fingers against it, a hidden compartment popped open, revealing a small key taped to the inside. My heart began to race. In 35 years of marriage, I'd never known this secret drawer existed. What else didn't I know? The key was small, likely for a lockbox rather than a door. I sat back in Richard's chair, turning it over in my hands, wondering what it might open. After searching the obvious places, desk drawers, filing cabinets, I moved to the closet where Richard kept older financial records and reference materials. Behind a row of tax return binders, I discovered a fireproof box I'd never seen before. The key fit perfectly. Inside, I found a leather portfolio containing legal documents. On top was a will dated 3 years earlier, not the will our family attorney had drawn up 15 years ago, which left everything to me with provisions for our children. This will, created with a different lawyer I'd never heard of, left everything our home. Richard's pension investment accounts, everything to someone named Elaine Winters. My hands trembled as I read through the document. There was a provision for me, modest monthly allowance, that would allow me to maintain a reasonable lifestyle, but the bulk of our marital assets, worth millions after Richard's successful career, would go to this woman, this stranger. Beneath the will were more documents: a deed to a house in Indianapolis purchased 15 years ago, owned jointly by Richard and Elaine Winters, life insurance policies naming her and 2 other people, Emma and Nathan Winters, as beneficiaries, and photographs. So many photographs. Richard with a petite blonde woman, his arm around her waist, both of them smiling at the camera. Richard cutting a birthday cake, the same woman beside him, along with 2 teenagers. Richard on a beach I didn't recognize with these same people. A family. Another family. The room began to spin. I couldn't breathe. 35 years of marriage, and I was looking at evidence that for at least half that time my husband had been living a double life. The business trips to Minneapolis, the weekend conferences, all lies carefully constructed to allow him time with his other family just 3 hours away. I stumbled to the bathroom and vomited, then sank to the floor, my back against the cold tile wall. How was this possible? How could I not have known? What kind of fool had I been? When I could finally move again, I returned to the office and continued examining the contents of the box. Credit card statements for accounts I didn't know existed, birthday cards signed, "All my love, Richard," school records for Emma and Nathan Winters, a college tuition payment plan for Emma, all evidence of a complete parallel life my husband had been living while married to me. With shaking hands, I picked up my phone and called my oldest son. "Michael," I said when he answered, my voice barely recognizable even to myself, "I need you to come over right now. I found something in Dad's office." There was a long pause before he responded. "What did you find, Mom?" "Documents, photos, evidence that your father had another family." The words felt impossible to say. Another pause, longer this time. Then, "Mom, I think you should sit down. There's something we need to talk about." His tone, resigned rather than shocked, told me everything. "You knew," I whispered. "You already knew about this." "I'll be there in 20 minutes, he said. "I'll call Sarah and James. We should all be there for this conversation." I hung up without responding. My children knew. My own children had known that their father was living a double life, and they had kept it from me. The betrayal was so enormous I couldn't process it. I sat at Richard's desk, surrounded by evidence of his deception, waiting for my children to arrive, and explain how they could have participated in this monumental lie. The sound of the front door opening roused me from my stunned state. I heard murmured voices in the foyer, then footsteps approaching the office. Michael entered first, his attorney face firmly in place, the neutral expression he wore when preparing to handle a difficult situation. Sarah followed, her eyes red and swollen as if she'd been crying. James came last, see, hands shoved deep in his pockets, jaw tight. How long have you known? I demanded before they could speak, gesturing to the documents spread across Richard's desk. How long have you been lying to me? They exchanged glances, those same secretive looks I'd noticed at the funeral. Michael, always the spokesman, cleared his throat. Mom, let's go sit in the living room. This isn't a conversation to have surrounded by all this. He gestured vaguely at the evidence of his father's betrayal. No, I said firmly. I want answers now. How long have you known that your father had another family? Michael sighed, rubbing his hand across his face. Almost 10 years. The words hit me like a physical blow. 10 years. A decade of deception, not just from Richard, but from my own children. How did you find out? I managed to ask. It was my fault, Michael admitted. During my second year of law school, I was clerking at a firm in Indianapolis for the summer. I was at a restaurant downtown and saw Dad. He didn't see me. He was with a woman and 2 kids, a teenage girl and a younger boy. They were celebrating something. There was a cake. The way Dad was with them, it was obvious they were a family. I closed my eyes, picturing the scene. Richard celebrating with his other family, while I believed he was at a business conference in Minneapolis. I followed them, Michael continued. They went back to a house in a nice neighborhood. I wrote down the address. The next day I looked up the property records. The house was owned jointly by Dad and Elaine Winters. And you didn't think to tell me? My voice rose, anger beginning to replace shock. I confronted Dad first, Michael said. He was shocked, then defensive, then he broke down. He told me everything. How he'd met Elaine on a business trip 16 years ago. How one thing led to another. He never meant for it to become a second life. But when she got pregnant with Emma... Stop! I cut him off. I don't need the details of how it started. The timeline Michael described meant Richard had been leading this double life for nearly half our marriage. What I want to know is why you didn't tell me. Sarah stepped forward, tears streaming down her face. We were going to tell you, Mom, but Dad begged us not to. He said it would destroy you, destroy our family. So instead, you all decided to live with his lie to become accomplices. We were caught in the middle, James said, speaking for the first time. Do you have any idea what that was like for us? Finding out our father had been lying to everyone for years, that we had half-siblings we'd never met. Half-siblings you apparently went on to meet, I said, noticing Sarah flinch, while continuing to lie to me. Dad introduced us, Sarah admitted quietly. After Michael found out, and then told us Dad decided it would be better if we knew them. If we were all connected somehow. Emma and Nathan, they're actually really great people. They didn't ask for any of this either. I felt like I was in some bizarre alternate reality. My children had relationships with their father's secret second family, all while I remained completely ignorant. So that you've been taking turns spending holidays with them, dividing up your father's attention like a timeshare, lying to my face for a decade. It wasn't like that, Mom, Michael insisted. We were protecting you. Protecting me? I laughed bitterly. From what? The truth. The chance to make my own decisions about my life. The opportunity to not waste 10 more years with a man who betrayed every vow he ever made to me. From pain, Sarah said softly. Dad still loved you. He took care of you, provided for you. Your marriage seemed happy. We didn't want to destroy that. That wasn't your decision to make, I said, my voice shaking with rage. You had no right to decide what information I could or couldn't handle. You treated me like a child, not an adult capable of dealing with reality no matter how painful. We were children when we found out, James argued. Michael was 23. I was just 17. What were we supposed to do? Blow up everyone's lives? You're not children anymore, I countered. Sarah, you're 30 years old. Michael, you're 33. You've had plenty of opportunities as adults to tell me the truth. And say what exactly? Michael's lawyer calm was beginning to crack. Hey, Mom, by the way, Dad's been living a whole separate life with another woman and their kids for the past 16 years. Just thought you should know before you go to your book club. Don't you dare make this about timing, I snapped. This is about loyalty. All three of you chose your father's secret over honesty with me. You prioritized his double life over my right to know the truth about my own marriage. Sarah sank into a chair, sobbing. We're sorry, Mom. We didn't know what to do. Dad made it seem like telling you would be cruel. And finding out after he's dead, discovering that my entire family has been lying to me for a decade, that's not cruel. My voice broke. Get out, all of you. I can't even look at you right now. Mom, please, Michael began. No, I need time to process this, without you here justifying your choices. Just go. One by one, they filed out of the office. I heard the front door close, then silence. Complete, deafening silence. I was alone with the knowledge that my entire family narrative, the story I'd believed about my life, my marriage, my children had been a carefully constructed lie. I picked up a framed photo from Richard's desk, our family at Sarah's medical school graduation, all smiling proudly. Had he gone straight from that celebration to his other family? How many moments that I treasured had been merely performances on his part? Was any of it real? Had Richard ever truly loved me? Or had I simply been a convenient first wife, too trusting to question his frequent absences? These questions would haunt me for months to come, but in that moment, sitting in the office of the man I thought I'd known, I felt nothing but rage and determination to uncover the full truth of Richard's betrayal. The next morning, I woke up with a clear sense of purpose cutting through my grief and shock. I needed legal advice from someone who wasn't my son or connected to Richard. I called a college friend who had recently gone through a difficult divorce and asked for her attorney's contact information. Dorothy, what's going on? She asked, concerned. Richard just passed away. It's complicated, I replied. I just discovered some troubling information and need professional advice. 2 hours later, I was sitting in the office of Patricia Lawson, a sharp-eyed divorce attorney with 30 years of experience. I realize this is an unusual situation, I explained after sharing the basics. Richard is already dead, so divorce isn't possible, but I need to understand my legal position regarding his estate. Patricia's expression remained neutral as she took notes. Even posthumously, this is a case of fraud and financial infidelity. There are legal remedies available, especially if marital assets were used to support this second household. She explained that while Richard's death complicated matters, I could potentially challenge the secret will on several grounds: that it was executed under fraudulent circumstances, that it attempted to dispose of marital property that should rightfully be mine, and that the original family attorney had no knowledge of this document. What about this Elaine person? I asked. The woman he's left everything to. Before we proceed with any legal challenge, I'd actually recommend meeting with her, Patricia suggested, which surprised me. Meet her. Why would I want to do that? 2 reasons, Patricia explained. First, it's possible she knows things about Richard's financial arrangements that could help your case. Second, she may be as blindsided by aspects of this situation as you are. In similar cases, I've handled sometimes the other woman has been fed just as many lies as the wife. The thought had never occurred to me that Elaine might also be a victim of Richard's deception. I'd automatically cast her as the villain in this scenario, the woman who helped my husband betray me for 16 years. But what if Richard had lied to her too? What would that conversation even look like? I wondered aloud. Neutral ground, public enough to keep emotions in check, private enough for a real conversation. I can arrange it if you'd like, even attend with you. After considering it overnight, I agreed. Patricia contacted Elaine through her attorney, and surprisingly, she agreed to meet. We arranged to meet at a private dining room in a downtown Chicago restaurant, halfway between my home and Indianapolis. The days leading up to the meeting were agonizing. I spent hours staring at the photographs I'd found studying this woman who had shared my husband for so many years. She was pretty in an understated way, perhaps 10 years younger than me. In the photo, she looked happy, normal. Not at all like the home wrecker I'd imagined. I also discovered more about Richard's financial arrangements. He'd been meticulous about keeping the two lives separate, yet equally funded. Our joint accounts showed regular transfers to accounts I'd never known about, always disguised as business expenses or investments. He'd managed to support two families on one income through elaborate financial juggling that his accounting expertise made possible. On the day of the meeting, I dressed carefully, not too formal, not too casual. I didn't want to appear either bitter or uncaring. I wanted to project strength. Patricia met me at the restaurant 15 minutes early to review our strategy. "Let her talk first," she advised. "People reveal more when they're nervous, and remember, the goal is information, not confrontation." At precisely noon, the restaurant manager led a woman to our table. Despite having studied her photos, seeing Elaine Winters in person was jarring. She was petite with shoulder-length blonde hair and the same nervous expression I'd seen in my own mirror that morning. "Mrs. Harrington," she said, extending her hand, "thank you for agreeing to meet." Her attorney, a silver-haired man named Robert Ellis, accompanied her. We all sat down in uncomfortable silence, settling over the table as we studied each other. "I'm not sure where to begin," Elaine finally said. "I never expected to be sitting across from you, at least not like this." "What does that mean, not like this?" I asked. She glanced at her attorney before responding. "Richard always said that you knew about us, that you had an arrangement, that you decided to stay married for appearance's sake, but that you had essentially given him permission to build a life with me." I felt the blood drain from my face. "That's absolutely false. I had no idea you existed until I found his secret will 2 weeks ago." Now it was Elaine's turn to look shocked. "But that makes no sense. We've been together for 16 years. He has 2 children with me. He spent every other weekend with us, plus at least 1 week a month. Holidays, vacations. How could you not know?" "Business trips," I said flatly. "Conferences, client meetings, audits in other cities. He had an explanation for every absence." Elaine shook her head in disbelief. "So when he was with your family on Christmas Eve, then flew to Indianapolis late Christmas Day to be with us through New Year's. I was told it was an emergency at the Cleveland office, that they needed the CFO on site immediately." The memory of that particular Christmas, how I'd accepted his apology and sent him off with leftovers for his dinner, made me feel physically ill. "And your children?" Elaine asked. "They've known Emma and Nathan for years. They visit, they call. Sarah was at Emma's high school graduation last year." "They've been lying to me, too." I admitted the words bitter in my mouth. "They found out about 10 years ago and decided to keep Richard's secret." Elaine sat back, visibly processing this information. "So Richard lied to everyone. He told me you knew and accepted our relationship. He told you he was working. He told our children, Emma and Nathan, that their half-siblings couldn't visit more often because you were opposed to our relationship. It was all fiction." For the first time, I felt a strange connection to this woman. We had both been manipulated by the same man, believing completely different stories about the same relationship. "Did he ever tell you he was going to divorce me?" I asked. "Constantly," Elaine replied. "For 15 years, it was always after the kids finished school, or after this big project at work, or when the timing is right. There was always a reason to wait. And you accepted that. For 16 years. She looked down at her hands. "I loved him. The children loved him. He was present and loving when he was with us. I convinced myself that a part-time father was better than no father at all for my kids." "Your kids," I repeated. "Tell me about them." Something softened in Elaine's expression. "Emma is 19, studying nursing at Indiana University. Nathan is 17, still in high school, captain of the debate team. They're good kids. This has been devastating for them, too. I tried to imagine these teenagers, technically my husband's children, processing their father's sudden death, and now this complicated revelation about his life. Does the will surprise you? I asked. The one leaving everything to you? Elaine exchanged glances with her attorney. Honestly, yes. Richard always told me he'd provide it for us through insurance policies and separate accounts. I never expected to inherit his marital assets. Our attorneys took over, then discussing legal options and potential compromises. But as the formal part of the conversation continued, Elaine and I kept exchanging glances, two women trying to reconcile completely different versions of the same man. As the meeting concluded, Elaine handed me a folder. These are copies of emails, cards, financial records, everything I have documenting our relationship. I think we both deserve the whole truth, even if it's painful. I accepted the folder, then impulsively reached into my purse and handed her a photograph I'd brought Richard and me on our 30th anniversary trip to Italy. Was any of it real? I asked, not really expecting an answer. For either of us. Elaine studied the photo, then met my gaze directly. I don't know, but I think we should find out together. As we parted ways, I realized I'd gained an unlikely ally in my quest to understand the man who had betrayed us both so completely. Over the following weeks, Elaine and I communicated regularly, comparing notes and timelines to piece together the elaborate deception Richard had maintained for nearly 2 decades. We created a shared online document, each adding details as we uncovered them, building a comprehensive picture of his double life. The magnitude of his deception was staggering. Richard had maintained separate phone numbers, email accounts, and even distinct personalities with each family. With my family, he was ambitious, somewhat reserved, the steady provider who handled all financial matters. With Elaine and her children, he was more relaxed, emotionally expressive, involved in daily routines. He never cooked a meal in our house, I told Elaine during one of our phone calls. Not once in 35 years. He made Sunday brunch every weekend he was with us, she replied, sounding as confused as I felt. French toast was his specialty. The kids called them daddy waffles. These contradictions made it impossible to determine which version of Richard had been the real one, or if either of us had ever known the real man at all. As we continued our investigation, we discovered something even more disturbing. Richard's longtime assistant at the insurance company, Janet, reached out to me after hearing rumors about the emerging scandal. Mrs. Harrington, there's something you should know, she said when we met for coffee. The company has been conducting an internal audit since Richard's death, and they found some irregularities. Those irregularities turned out to be systematic embezzlement spanning at least 12 years. Richard had been siphoning company funds through fake vendor accounts, apparently to help maintain his 2 separate households without either woman noticing financial strain. The total is approaching $2 million, Janet confided. The company is trying to keep it quiet while they investigate fully, but there will likely be legal action against the estate. I immediately called Patricia, my attorney, who arranged an emergency meeting with Elaine and her lawyer. This new information changed everything about our inheritance dispute. If the company files charges posthumously and wins their case, they could claim a significant portion of Richard's estate as restitution, Patricia explained. Neither of you might end up with much at all. How could he do this? I wondered aloud, still struggling to reconcile the Richard I thought I knew, ethical, responsible, respected, with this emerging portrait of a con man. Wasn't he worried about getting caught? People who create these elaborate double lives often have psychological profiles similar to high-functioning sociopaths, Patricia said. They believe they're smarter than everyone else and that normal rules don't apply to them. They're also extraordinary compartmentalizers. The more we uncovered, the more this assessment seemed accurate. Richard had constructed elaborate safeguards to prevent his 2 lives from intersecting, but had never created a contingency plan for if they did. It was as if he couldn't conceive of being caught, despite the increasing risk, as our children became involved. Meanwhile, my relationship with my children remained strained. I'd had limited contact with them since our confrontation, just brief text messages assuring them I was functioning, but needed space. Their betrayal felt almost as significant as Richard's, though I recognized they'd been placed in an impossible position as young adults. Michael was the first to breach the silence, showing up at my door one evening with files from his law firm. "I'm not here to make excuses," he said when I reluctantly let him in, "but I do want to help with the legal mess Dad left behind." He'd been researching similar cases and brought information that could help defend against the company's potential lawsuit. "I also spoke with Emma and Nathan yesterday," he added cautiously. "They'd like to meet you when you're ready. They have questions only you can answer about who Dad really was." The thought of meeting Richard's other children, technically my stepchildren, I realized with a jolt was overwhelming, but I found myself nodding. Maybe, not yet, but maybe soon. Over the next few weeks, Richard's former colleagues and friends began reaching out. Some had suspected something wasn't quite right, but never imagined the extent of his deception. Others were completely shocked, having believed the carefully crafted image he presented to the world. "I worked alongside him for 15 years, his former controller told me. "We had lunch together almost every day. I thought I knew him, but clearly none of us did." The community gossip was difficult to endure. I stopped attending my book club after overhearing whispers about being the clueless wife. I avoided the grocery store where we'd shopped for years, tired of pitying looks from neighbors. Instead, I focused my energy on untangling Richard's financial web and building a relationship with Elaine that would allow us to resolve the estate issues without further legal battles. After much discussion with our attorneys, Elaine and I decided to present a united front against the company's embezzlement claims while working toward a fair division of whatever assets remained after restitution. Neither of us had been aware of Richard's financial crimes, which strengthened our position as innocent parties. Through all of this, I struggled with insomnia and trust issues. My therapist, yet another new addition to my life, suggested a support group for people who discovered their partners had led double lives. The stories I heard there were both comforting and disturbing. I wasn't alone in being deceived so completely, but the patterns of manipulation described by others in the group made me question every memory of my marriage. 3 months after Richard's death, I finally agreed to meet with all my children together. We gathered in my living room, the tension palpable. "I'm still angry," I began honestly. "I'm hurt that you kept this from me for so long, but I'm trying to understand the impossible position your father put you in." "We should have told you," Sarah acknowledged. "We convinced ourselves we were protecting you, but maybe we were just avoiding a difficult conversation." "I was only 17 when Michael told us what he'd discovered," James added. "Dad swore us to secrecy, said it would kill you if you found out. I was still a kid, still living at home. I didn't know what to do." "And later," I asked, "when you were adults making your own decisions?" "By then it had been a secret for so long," Michael admitted. "The longer we waited, the harder it became to tell you. And honestly, your marriage seemed good. Dad was attentive, present when he was home. We told ourselves that whatever arrangement he had going, it wasn't hurting you if you didn't know." "But it was," I said quietly. "Every day he lied. Every moment I made decisions based on incomplete information about my own life. It was hurting me. I just didn't know it yet." We talked for hours, tears flowing freely, as my children shared their perspective on the impossible situation Richard had created. I learned how they'd first met Emma and Nathan, awkward supervised visits, orchestrated by Richard, gradually evolving into genuine sibling relationships. How they'd maintained separate relationships with their father, always careful never to mention one family to the other. "Emma and Nathan are victims in this too," Sarah pointed out. "They grew up thinking their half-siblings couldn't acknowledge them publicly because their mother you wouldn't accept them. Now they're learning their entire family narrative was a lie." By evening's end, we hadn't resolved everything, but we'd made a start. I set clear boundaries, complete honesty moving forward, respect for my need to process at my own pace, and their support as I navigated the legal and financial maze Richard had left behind. "I don't know if I'll ever fully trust any of you again," I told them as they prepared to leave, "but you're my children and I love you. We'll find a way forward somehow." As they left, I felt the weight of Richard's betrayal pressing down on me again. Not just his betrayal of me as his wife, but of our entire family. The man who had presented himself as the model husband and father had created a legacy of lies that would take years, perhaps generations, to fully unravel. 6 months after discovering Richard's double life, I sold our family home. Every room contained memories, now tainted by knowledge of his deception. The office where he died, where I'd found the evidence of his betrayal. The kitchen where we'd shared thousands of family meals between his trips to his other family. The bedroom where I'd believed we'd shared a genuine intimacy for 35 years. "Are you sure about this?" Michael asked as we packed the last of my personal items. "This has been your home for 20 years. "I'm sure," I replied. "I need a fresh start somewhere without Richard's ghost around every corner." I purchased a modern townhouse in a different suburb, smaller but perfect for my needs. A clean slate. The process of downsizing forced me to evaluate every possession, every photograph, every memento of my marriage. What was real? What was worth keeping? What had been part of Richard's performance as the devoted husband? The legal battles continued. Richard's former company filed claims against his estate for the embezzled funds as expected. Elaine and I, maintaining our unlikely alliance, countered with evidence that we had been unaware of his financial crimes and should not be penalized for them. The insurance policies Richard had maintained for both families became critical as they were not part of the contestable estate. Throughout this period, I gradually rebuilt my relationship with my children. It wasn't easy. Trust once broken doesn't mend quickly, but we established new patterns of honest communication. They helped with the move, with navigating the legal complexities, and eventually with facilitating meetings between me and Richard's other children. Meeting Emma and Nathan was surreal. Emma, at 19, had Richard's eyes and analytical mind. Nathan, 17, had his build and easy charm. Both seemed wary, but curious about the woman who had unknowingly shared their father for their entire lives. Did he talk about me? I found myself asking during our second meeting. Did he tell you what I was like? He said you were brilliant, Emma answered. That you gave up your career to raise your family, but that you were the smartest teacher he'd ever known. He kept a photo of you in his wallet, Nathan added. We always thought it was weird since he had one of Mom too in a different section. Now we understand why. These small revelations that Richard had carried my photo, had spoken positively about me to his other children, provided no real comfort. They only highlighted how completely he had normalized his deception, incorporating it into everyday interactions with both families. The first holiday season was the hardest. I declined invitations from my children, not ready to witness their continued relationships with Emma and Nathan. Instead, I booked a solo trip to Arizona, somewhere Richard and I had never visited together. The desert landscape, stark and beautiful, matched my emotional state, stripped bare, but with its own austere beauty. In a Sedona hotel room, watching the sunset paint the red rocks, I made a list of everything I had lost: my husband, my unwavering trust in my children, my financial security, my social standing, my sense of my own judgment, and perhaps most significantly, the narrative of my life as I had understood it. Then I made a second list: what remained: my intelligence, my resilience, my health, my children despite their mistake in keeping Richard's secret, new authentic relationships developing with people who knew the whole complicated truth about my life, and something unexpected, a growing sense of independence I'd never fully experienced before. You're going to be okay, I told my reflection in the hotel mirror. This isn't the end of your story. Upon returning home, I made two significant decisions. First, I would return to teaching, reclaiming the professional identity I had set aside during my marriage. Second, I would start dating again, not immediately, but eventually. At 58, I still had decades of life ahead of me. I refused to let Richard's betrayal define my future. I enrolled in courses to update my teaching certification, finding unexpected joy in engaging with educational theory again. The intellectual stimulation provided a welcome distraction from ongoing legal matters, and the structure gave purpose to days that might otherwise have been consumed by rumination on the past. Gradually, my relationship with James, my youngest, strengthened the most. Perhaps because he had been youngest when the deception was revealed to the siblings, or perhaps because he had always been the family rebel, he seemed most able to acknowledge the wrongness of keeping Richard's secret while also moving forward. "I've started seeing a therapist," he confided during a lunch meeting in February. "I'm trying to understand why I went along with Dad's lies for so long. Why we all did." "What have you learned?" I asked. "That Dad was emotionally manipulative in ways I'm only now recognizing. He made his problems our problems, made us feel responsible for protecting you, for protecting the family image, for everything." This insight resonated deeply. Richard had been a master manipulator, convincing everyone, me, Elaine, our children, his colleagues, that we were seeing the real authentic man, when in fact we were each seeing only the facet he chose to present. By the 1-year anniversary of Richard's death, the legal matters were mostly resolved. The company received a significant portion of Richard's estate as restitution for the embezzlement. The remaining assets were divided between Elaine and me, with provisions for all 5 children. It wasn't the financial security Richard had promised either of us, but it was enough to move forward. To mark the anniversary, I suggested something unconventional to my children, a truth dinner with everyone, my 3 children, Elaine, Emma, and Nathan. A gathering where no topic would be off limits, where we would openly acknowledge the complex web of relationships Richard had created and our collective path forward. "Are you sure, Mom?" Sarah asked when I proposed the idea. "That seems really intense." "I'm done with secrets and half-truths," I replied. "If we're going to be connected through you 3 and your relationships with your half-siblings, I want everything in the open." The dinner was difficult but cathartic. We shared stories, compared experiences, laughed sometimes at the absurdity of Richard's elaborate deceptions, and cried at the pain he had caused. Elaine and I, once potential adversaries, had developed a genuine respect for each other through our shared ordeal. "He didn't deserve either of you," Michael observed as we finished dessert. "You've both handled this with more grace than anyone could expect." "We didn't have much choice," Elaine replied. "We either fell apart or found a way through." To finding a way through, I raised my glass in a toast, and to honesty no matter how difficult. As the evening ended, Nathan approached me privately. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "You could have hated us, seen us as the products of Dad's betrayal. Instead, you've tried to understand. That means a lot." His words touched me deeply. These children, all 5 of them, had been the innocent victims of their father's choices. My anger remained directed at Richard, not at those he had manipulated and deceived. The truth dinner became an annual tradition, a reminder of our commitment to honesty and our refusal to continue the patterns of secrecy Richard had established. Each year, the conversation became a little easier, the relationships a little more natural. I eventually did start dating again, tentatively at first. I was transparent with potential partners about my unusual past, using it as a filter of sorts. Those who couldn't handle the complexity weren't right for me anyway. 2 years after Richard's death, I published an anonymous essay about discovering a spouse's double life, which led to speaking engagements at support groups for others who had experienced similar betrayals. Helping others navigate the particular pain of such deception gave purpose to my experience. The hardest part, I would tell these groups, is recognizing that the person you loved may never have truly existed. That's a different kind of grief than losing someone to death. It's losing someone to the knowledge that they were never who you thought they were. Looking back now, 4 years after discovering Richard's secret will, I can see how far I've come. The pain hasn't disappeared completely. I doubt it ever will. but it no longer defines me. I've reclaimed my identity, built new relationships based on complete transparency, and found strength I never knew I possessed. The question that haunted me in those early days, was any of it real, no longer seems as important. Whether Richard truly loved me at some point, whether parts of our marriage were genuine despite his deception, these questions have no definitive answers. What matters is that I'm real. My resilience is real. My capacity to rebuild after devastating betrayal is real. If you've ever experienced profound betrayal or deception from someone you trusted completely, I hope my story offers some comfort. You're not alone, and while the path to healing isn't linear or simple, it is possible. Have you ever had to rebuild your life after discovering a painful truth? Share your story in the comments below. If this resonated with you, please hit the like button, subscribe to hear more true stories of resilience, and share this video with someone who might need to hear that survival is possible even after the most shocking betrayals. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, the truth may be painful, but it's always worth knowing.